understand the mindset of Arjuna, we first have to understand the environment in which he was there. He was there in a war field, Kurukshetra. In Kurukshetra war, we say that there were 11 Akshauhinis in Kaurava Sena and 7 Akshauhinis in the Pandava Sena. Now, what do we mean by a Akshauhini? An Akshauhini means that 21,870 chariots were there and an equal number of elephants, which is 21,870. And for every chariot, every one single chariot, we had to have 3 horses, which would mean the total number of horses per Akshauhini was 65,610 horses. And now again, per Akshauhini, we had to have 1,09,350 soldiers. And when you add the total, it comes to 2,18,700, and that is 1 Akshauhini. Now we had 11 Akshauhinis on Kaurava's side and 7 Akshauhinis on Pandava's side. Now imagine the size of the army that was there in the Kurukshetra Yuddha. Now when we think about it, 2,18,700 is the total number of an Akshauhini army. Now if you add this, you get 18. So 18 is actually a very important number in the scheme of things. If you think about it, there were 11 Akshauhinis on the Kaurava side and 7 Akshauhinis on the Pandava side. If you add that, you again get 18. The number of adhyayas or chapters in Bhagavad Geetha is 18. In fact, at a different level, the number of Puranas is 18, and 18 has a lot of significance. So we will discuss more about it as we progress, but here this again totals to 18. And another interesting thing is a lot of things that we observe, learn from Mahabharata or Bhagavad Gita has a lot to do with us. If you just look at this number, 21,870 is the number of chariots in an Akshauhini, right? Now that is the same number of breath that we take every day. Now when we are born, God gives us a lifespan of 100 years. And it is said that our lifespan can be increased or decreased depending on the way we control our breath. People call it as pranayama, the way we control our breath. In today's environment, a lot many times we get stressed, tensed, we are anxious about a lot of things. And what do we do when we are stressed or tensed or anxious? We tend to breathe much faster. So when we breathe fast, what happens is our lifespan actually reduces. So the number of years that's given to a human being is 100 years, where the Vedas say Shatamanam Bhavati, which means that you may live 100 years. And that is the number of breathings that's given to us, allocated to us. Because of our lifestyle, we tend to reduce our lifespan. If you observe an interesting fact here, the Kaurava Sena had actually 11 Akshauhinis, a much larger army, while the Pandavas had only 7. But just as how we discussed about breathing, if we use lesser breath, we live for a longer time. The Pandavas' army had lesser number, but they ended up winning the war. So this is a relationship between our breathing and the Akshauhini Senas in the Pandavas and the Kauravas' army. Here is Arjuna, a warrior par excellence. This Arjuna is hell-bent on establishing dharma. Now he wants to go and see people who are going to fight against dharma. Now he goes there. He sees the huge 11 Akshauhini army of the Kauravas. He is seeing a lot of his relatives, a lot of his friends, a lot of known people. And at that point, he just looks at his preceptors. He looks at his gurus, his acharyas. He sees Kripacharya, he sees Dronacharya. He sees his ancestor Bhishma. Seeing all this, his heart starts beating faster. He is perturbed, he is disturbed. He doesn't know what he has to do. Now his mind says that he has to fight a war for dharma. Now his heart says, what are you going to gain by fighting with your own people? Are you going to gain any happiness because of that? What is the point of gaining wealth because of all that? Is there any fortune after killing your own people? At this point in time, he's not able to make any decisions. At this point in time, he's looking forward to someone who can guide him in the right direction. He wants to know what is right and what is wrong, what is the path he has to take. He has to decide on the right course of action based on which he can stand saying that this is the right path, I know about that, and I'm not going to be disturbed beyond this point. So he has to have such a strong decision-making capacity at this time. Here is when Lord Krishna gives him Bhagavad Gita. Now, people ask so many different questions when it comes to Bhagavad Gita. Some of the frequently asked questions would be like, why did everything happen during the battle? How long did it take? What were some of the questions which Arjuna asked Krishna? Why did Arjuna address Krishna with so many different names, so on and so forth? Now, when I start thinking about these questions, Krishna usually reveals a lot of answers. Just like how he reveals for many spiritual seekers, I did get a lot of answers. I would like to share some of these answers with you. Now, coming to the very first question, why did this happen in a battlefield? We should remember, Lord Krishna is the Lord. He decides when what should happen, where what should happen. Now, in this case, Krishna chose the battlefield. It did not happen in a battlefield, he chose the battlefield. Now, why did he have to choose a battlefield? Because Krishna and Arjuna are after all cousins. They could have met at any point of time. Krishna could have actually prepared Arjuna well before the war started. Why did it happen in the battlefield? Because Krishna decided, look, in everyday life, all my children are facing a lot of these challenges. A war between the mind and the heart happens all the time. An internal civil war happens. So let me give you a real war zone. And if something can be revealed in a real war zone, if something can be practiced in a real war zone, why can't you practice it in your everyday life? Because life is nothing but a much simpler challenge compared to the actual war zone where it's all about life and death. So Krishna chose to reveal the Gita in the war zone just to benefit us. Now, did it happen during the war? How can a spiritual upliftment or a discourse on spirituality happen during the war? To answer this question, number one, it did not happen during the war, it happened before the war. There are around 18 steps which happens before the war. Some of the steps here are, both the armies are now getting ready to start the war. There are usually a lot of formations that happen which are called as vyuhas. There are examples like Suchi Vyuha, Chakra Vyuha. One of the army will form a shape, and how the other army penetrates this will decide on who is going to be successful. Another step would be they praying to their respective deities. In fact, it is said that Arjuna, under the instruction of Krishna, prayed to goddess Durga, who actually appeared there before the war could actually start. And another thing is the instructions given to the armies on the rules, the do's and the don'ts before the war. So a lot of these steps happen. In fact, all these are discussed in the Bhishma Parva. And in the 42nd Parva, a lot of these happens. And Geethopadesam gets completed in the 42nd Parva itself. The 43rd Parva is there, and only in the 44th Parva, the actual shooting starts. Now what happens in the 43rd Parva is, Yudhishthira, the eldest brother of Arjuna, goes and worships and gets the blessings of his gurus from the opponent team. So he goes, he worships Kripacharya, he worships Dronacharya, he also gets the blessings and the permission of Bhishma, who is their ancestor. Another event is also mentioned where the announcement happens. If anybody wants to change their position and wants to fight for the other team, they were permitted to change their position. And there was one king called Yuyutsu who was in the Kauravas team, who actually moved to the Pandavas side. So all these were the events that is mentioned, which means that Geethopadesa happened much before the war and not during the war. So here we have Krishna's names. Chant and be blessed.